Once a senator, always a senator. That is tonight's lesson in American politics. After a day of commentators bewildered and wondering why Republican Senators John Cornyn and Thom Tillis, in their last months as United States senators, are caving to Donald Trump after pretending that they would not vote for Todd Blanche's confirmation as Attorney General unless the Trump slush fund created by Todd Blanche, along with a tax amnesty for Donald Trump and his family, were eliminated in writing that somehow would carry the force of law. The standoff ended at 11:09 p.m. last night when Todd Blanche posted on social media copies of two new pieces of paper, one signed by Todd Blanche and another signed by absolutely no one. Neither of these pieces of paper have any force of law and are in no way binding on Todd Blanche or anyone else involved in the scheme. The two pieces of paper that Todd Blanche produced publicly do not prevent Todd Blanche from simply reinstituting everything about the slush fund in its entirety after he is confirmed as Attorney General. And this morning, right on schedule, Senators Cornyn and Tillis issued a joint statement saying they're completely satisfied with the unenforceable pieces of paper that Todd Blanche released. And now they are happily ready to vote for Todd Blanche to serve as Attorney General, saying, quote, "We look forward to voting to advance his nomination out of the Senate Judiciary Committee soon." And with that written statement and their complete public surrender to Donald Trump after Donald Trump attacked them both this weekend on social media, Senator Cornyn and Senator Tillis have both preserved their futures as Washington lobbyists. Sadly, in the 21st century, the most common post-Senate occupation for former United States senators is Washington lobbyist. It wasn't always this way. The lobbying afterlife of senators started in the 20th century, when the senator I worked for, Daniel Patrick Moynihan, retired from the Senate in January of 2001, the day Hillary Clinton took the oath of office to serve in his place in the Senate. Senator Moynihan went back to his previous life in academia. He was a Harvard professor when he ran for Senate and won in 1976. And after the Senate, he joined the faculty of Syracuse University. That was already a rare choice by that time in our politics, when former senators have become worth millions upon millions of dollars as lobbyists in Washington. Senators have lifetime floor privileges. That means that a United States senator, after leaving office, for the rest of his or her life, can just walk onto the Senate floor with all of the freedom of a serving United States senator. No mere lobbyist who was not a senator is even allowed to ride in the senators' only elevators in the Senate buildings. With the hordes of lobbyists in Washington trying to get appointments with senators, it helps a lot when the lobbyist used to sit beside that senator in committee hearings or on the Senate floor. Nothing helps more than that. That's what makes senators so valuable as lobbyists. Former senators are worth more money as lobbyists when their party is in power, of course, but they are worth zero money forever if they are shunned by their party. John Cornyn and Thom Tillis had a right to fear that if they voted against Donald Trump's former criminal defense lawyer becoming Donald Trump's attorney general, they might never be able to get an appointment in a Republican senator's office again, to lobby for anything, to ask for anything, including just getting their passports renewed quickly. John Cornyn and Thom Tillis might not become lobbyists, but they will still want or need some kind of favors at some time from Republican senators, including jobs for family and friends. And that is why you saw Thom Tillis being so timid in his language about this situation last week, so apologetic for even hinting at getting in the way. And I pointed out Thom Tillis's timidity last week, using that word about him here on this program when covering this standoff. I never once expressed the slightest confidence that John Cornyn or Thom Tillis would actually find the courage to vote against Todd Blanche's confirmation. And it doesn't take courage to vote against the acting attorney general who created a slush fund that you, Thom Tillis and John Cornyn, found to be unethical and improper. Just the creation of that slush fund and the tax amnesty for Donald Trump and his family, that's reason enough to vote against Todd Blanche. If you just base your vote on the common standards used for Senate confirmation for the lifetimes of those senators. Todd Blanche has many other transgressions in his time at the Trump Justice Department that require a vote against his confirmation, such as trying to prosecute former FBI Director James Comey for posting a photograph of seashells. Todd Blanche has many more disqualifying ethical strikes against him beyond just the slush fund and the tax amnesty for Donald Trump. So it doesn't take courage to vote against Todd Blanche. It takes common decency. There is absolutely no way a Republican nominee for Attorney General in the 20th century with Todd Blanche's unethical record could possibly have won support of Republicans in the United States Senate. That's the way it used to be. But Donald Trump has corrupted every single Republican senator to some degree. And Donald Trump has corrupted most Republican senators completely. Just completely bent them to his will on everything. The top Democrat on the House Judiciary Committee, Congressman Jamie Raskin, who will be chairman of the House Judiciary Committee next year, where he will have jurisdiction over Todd Blanche and the Justice Department if the Democrats win control of the House of Representatives, issued a statement today saying that Todd Blanche has, in fact, left his, quote, corrupt scheme fully intact, including the unprecedented super pardon shielding the Trump family businesses from legal accountability for their efforts to bilk the tax system and profit from the presidency. Blanche has made clear that he is using his office as the country's chief law enforcement officer to create structural roadblocks to prevent the Trump family and their businesses from ever being held accountable for any of their corruption or lawlessness, including a torrent of suspiciously timed stock trades, shady no-bid government contracts handed to companies the Trump family is invested in, or even allegations of sexual assault by Trump revealed in the Epstein files. MS Now's Jake Traylor asked Donald Trump today about the deal that preserves Donald Trump's tax amnesty and wins him a Senate-confirmed attorney general.
Mr. President, did you sign off on Todd Blanche rescinding the anti-weaponization fund? And also, there are Democrats right now who say there's essentially two tax codes. There's the Trump family tax code and a normal people tax code. Why do you think that your family deserves some level of special exemption when it comes to the auditing of taxes?
Well, I'll go into that. First of all, I had a 10-year case that was settled until I announced I was running for office. It was a settled deal like I've been doing all my life. I've been audited every year for my entire life, which I have a lot of wealthy friends who were never audited. To this day, they were never audited. I was audited. And my deal was settled. In writing, it was settled, subject to final approval. Then I announced I was running for president, and all they did was haunt me with it. They ended the settlement, and they went after me illegally.
He's lying about a lot there. First of all, it's worth noting that every president prior to Donald Trump automatically had their tax returns audited while they were serving as president of the United States. That became standard procedure for the IRS. Donald Trump was never investigated illegally in a tax audit, as he claimed. Donald Trump claimed that he was the subject of a tax audit before he even began running for president in 2015. He told us that in 2015, before he started his campaign. He couldn't release his tax returns because he was being audited. Never mind that every previous president had released their tax returns even when they were being audited by the IRS. That audit is one of the audits that we know had been going on for a significant amount of time due to the complexity of Donald Trump's tax returns before he became a political candidate. Donald Trump rambled on without answering the question, did you sign off on the deal? And so I am proud to say MS Now's Jake Traylor did what a White House correspondent is supposed to do. He asked the question again.
Mr. President, did you sign off on Todd Blanche rescinding?
I didn't look at it. All I know is that Todd Blanche is great. He's going to do a great job. Everybody knows it. And I understand there's been a sign off, but I don't know what they agreed. I think Todd Blanche agreed to reconfirm things that he's already said, and what he said was okay.
Yeah, can I ask,
Please go ahead.
Are there other avenues you'd have supporters get paid potentially if it's not the anti-weaponization fund? Is there another?
Who are you with?
I'm with MS Now, sir.
You who?
MS Now.
MS Now?
Yes, sir.
What a terrible show that is. They have the worst people on that show.
Are there other avenues that you want to see people?
No, there's no other avenues that I know about. Go ahead.
And then Donald Trump got the subject change he was hoping for from another reporter who asked him about the Strait of Hormuz, to which Donald Trump hallucinated about the possibility of the United States of America charging a fee for ships to pass through the Strait of Hormuz, something that could never be done and will never be done. And oh, by the way, would be a crime against international law and laws of the seas. And there's only one person in the world who could even say something as insane as that out loud, and that is the pathological liar sitting in the Oval Office today who claimed he didn't know anything about the deal that gives him and his family tax amnesty and that he could painfully discover is unenforceable if the next Attorney General of the United States is chosen by a Democratic president in 2029. Leading off our coverage tonight is Senator Sheldon Whitehouse of Rhode Island. He serves on the Senate Judiciary Committee and the Senate Finance Committee. Senator, what is your reading of these? Some people have referred to these things today as documents. I can't even call them documents. These two pieces of paper that Todd Blanche made public.
Well, the old saying is they're not worth the paper that they're printed on. And it's a little bit discouraging that people who sit on the Judiciary Committee would accept those pieces of paper as the proper resolution of their vote on Todd Blanche. First of all, as you pointed out, this guy can go back and in a month, instead of the $1.776 billion anti-weaponization fund, he can put together the $1.9 billion Trump Justice Fund. Or they could set up the, ice cream window at the Department of Justice that all of the MAGA people get to drive up to and make a friendly Federal Tort Claims Act claim and be handed a check. So the idea that they've stopped payments to cop beaters just doesn't pass muster. And second, here you've got this guy, it's like I'm a burglar and I'm going to give you some of the jewelry back that I stole, and now we're all quits. No, you're still a burglar. This is still the guy that cooked up the crooked slush fund scheme, the guy that cooked up the Trump family tax fraud amnesty. You may pull those back, but that doesn't change who he is or what he did. And last of all, what he did is so bad that he's still under inquiry in Florida for his conduct being part of a fraud on the court. Unimaginable language about any senior person at the Department of Justice. So sure looks like they got hornswoggled.
Yeah, so there is that federal judge in Florida who has said that this appears to be a fraud on the court, and that judge is still investigating it, still demanding information about it. So that is yet to come, and that won't come before this confirmation vote in the Senate. And then just taking the original round of Todd Blanche pieces of paper about this. Those things said that the only way to change anything that was written there was by a written agreement of all the parties involved. And those parties include Donald Trump. Donald Trump, the party, is sitting there today telling the lie. I don't know anything about it. I mean, we know he's lying about that. But what is true is the Trump side of this case did not share in that piece of paper in any way. They didn't co-sign it. They didn't do anything. They didn't issue a paper of their own. And so this thing that Todd Blanche is doing now violates what the thing he wrote before even pretends to allow for.
Yeah, the sort of basic rule is that when there's a contract or agreement between two parties, both parties have to represent their agreement to it. Even back to the old days when somebody, made their X because they couldn't sign their name, you still made a physical mark that manifested that this was in fact a deal. And what's weird is that there's a reciprocal here. In all the Department of Justice stuff that comes out, there's never a signature or any apparent manifestation of consent by the Trump lawyers. But then you go back down to Florida, where the lawsuit is still being reviewed and it's actually under appeal. And the judge has just asked 6 very good lawyers to respond to the appeal. So that's continuing. But in all of that, the Department of Justice never appeared. It couldn't be more weird that there's a huge federal case taking place and the Department of Justice never enters an appearance, never files a document. So you have these two parallel universes, one emerging from Blanche's office in which no Trump attorney ever signs, and the other, the Trump litigation in Florida against the Department of Justice and the government, where the Department of Justice never appears. And everything else is just in kind of this fairyland of hints and guesswork and non-binding stuff out in between. It's all just public talk, which means it can all be completely undone right away when Trump gives Blanche the orders to set up, slush fund 2.0.
Senator Whitehouse, we have to squeeze in a commercial break here. When we come back, I want to talk about the fact that Donald Trump today spent more time talking about the reflecting pool that he ruined than the war in Iran that he started. We'll be right back with Senator Whitehouse. Donald Trump often appears to forget that he's waging war in Iran because he spends more time, as he did today, talking about the reflecting pool in the Washington Mall than he did talking about his war. Today, he once again publicly interfered in a federal prosecution, this time involving the fake vandalism charge that Donald Trump's federal prosecutor in Washington, D.C. decided to drop. When Donald Trump was asked about it today, the reporter couldn't even finish the question before Donald Trump announced his finding as the real judge and jury in the case.
Have you spoken to Jeanine Pirro about her decision to drop?
No, Jeanine Pirro made a mistake. There was vandalism. Frankly, I think she choked because the judge was really vicious. Instead of going after the people that did it, the judge went after her and went after her department. And I guess she choked. I don't know what the hell happened.
That statement, of course, in and of itself makes the prosecution, which Jeanine Pirro has already dropped, impossible to pursue because the president of the United States saying you're guilty on TV would be enough to get the case thrown out on the grounds of prejudicial pretrial publicity and malicious prosecution by the president himself. In discussing what he thinks is the evidence in the case today, 80-year-old Donald Trump said this.
Now, we have photographs or tapes, like moving cameras, right?
Moving cameras? I guess you could call it that, maybe 100 years ago. He apparently means video.
We have them where people are on the side cutting it with a box knife. Was it? So now I'm not saying I was 100% thrilled with the contractor, but the contractor was rushing. We wanted to get it open for July 4th, and we got it done. But in addition, there was vandalism.
But in the same rambling 8-minute answer about the reflecting pool, Donald Trump admitted that even he, the highly prejudiced judge and jury in the case, has no idea no idea who might have committed the crime he imagines.
And if you look at the tape, now the tape isn't a great tape in the sense that it's a little hard to say who it exactly was, but it was people cutting this very expensive material, waterproofing material.
A little hard to say who exactly it was. So Donald Trump wants the three-time Olympic athlete David Hearn, who Jeanine Pirro charged with that crime, convicted of that crime, even though Donald Trump says it's a little hard to say who it exactly was. What we do know is whose fault it is that the reflecting pool is now a disaster area.
We essentially use a very high-grade swimming pool type material, which was my idea. I was very proud of that idea.
Donald Trump personally destroyed the reflecting pool with the idea he's now very proud of. Donald Trump has also stressed that no one has been prosecuted for what he calls the vandalism of cutting the grass on the Washington Mall. He's outraged about that too. And only Donald Trump can now safely describe the image that was left in the grass after the grass was cut, because Donald Trump has tried to make it a federal crime to say the 4 digits that were left in the grass.
Did you see what they did? Did you see what they wrote? What did they write?
8647.
That's right, 8647. They 86 them. So it's 8647. They didn't do 45. At least they left 45 out. But they, and massive letters on the grass, 8647. And nobody talked about that.
Senator Sheldon Whitehouse is back with us. And Senator, I'm so glad Donald Trump said those numbers, because I know it's a federal crime for me to say it. So he saved me from having to stumble
Although
into
there are
that.
900 things for sale on Amazon that are 8647. Other than that, it's a really bad deal.
Yeah. So this is another window into federal prosecution under Donald Trump. There's definitely a crime been committed because Donald Trump's decided there's been a crime. In the case of James Comey, the crime is that he took a photograph of seashells that said 8647. That's the crime there. Donald Trump wants that prosecuted. Todd Blanche goes ahead and tries to prosecute it. Donald Trump has no idea who to prosecute here. So anyone you arrest is okay with him because there must have been a crime.
The most basic rule of criminal prosecution is that the government has to turn over evidence that is exculpatory, that would tend to prove the innocence of the defendant. It's the worst thing you can do to pursue a defendant, holding back evidence of that defendant's innocence. And the rule comes from a case called Brady versus Maryland. So it's the Brady rule. And people who aren't even lawyers know about a Brady violation. And what Donald Trump's imagined crime caused is for Jeanine Pirro to create a fake case against an innocent American. And then her lawyers ran into Brady when they realized that the Department of Interior had sorts of exculpatory evidence proving that their case had no merit at all. And the Department of Justice takes a Brady violation very seriously. It's not something that federal prosecutors do. So that's the wall that they hit. And you could tell from the pleading how angry they were at the Department of Interior for having misled them, or how much they wanted to make it look like they were angry at the Department of Interior for misleading them to get themselves out of trouble with the federal court as the case went forward. But this is Donald Trump running up against Brady versus Maryland, prosecution 101, the most obvious form of prosecutorial misconduct you can commit.
Former U.S. Attorney, Senator Sheldon Whitehouse, thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
Coming up, Donald Trump spent the weekend publicly hallucinating fantasies while he once again failed to find a way out of his war in Iran. Admiral John Kirby will join us next. The bad news for the American military is that Donald Trump spent much of the weekend locked in hallucination and fantasy, which is a very bad place for a commander-in-chief to be in the middle of a war started by that commander-in-chief. Donald Trump appears to hate reality so much that he spent the day issuing AI-generated posts about his hallucinations about Greenland and about himself in a commander's uniform in the middle of what appears to be a battle fought 170 years before Donald Trump was born. Donald Trump spent Saturday in that fantasy world after having threatened Iran once again with the most deadly military strike since World War II. At the end of Donald Trump's day-long retreat to social media fantasy, Donald Trump, of course, as everyone expected, as usual, called off his attack on Iran because he claimed, quote, "We have just been asked by Iran and other Middle Eastern countries to hold off any attack in that the perimeters of a deal has been agreed to." He ended that post by saying, "Get to work, everybody, and get it done," as if he himself, the self-proclaimed great negotiator, has absolutely nothing to do with negotiating an end to war with Iran. Iran, of course, denied, as usual, that they were in any negotiations with the United States, which provoked Donald Trump to say once again today that this time, it really is this time, Iran's last chance.
This is the last chance. This is not something that, if it doesn't happen, this is the last chance for them to sign a good document. We'll find out today or tomorrow. I mean, they're going to go quickly, one way or the other. It's not very complex. We're talking about the strait, the opening of the strait, having it open literally by tomorrow, completely open. And that's phase one. And phase two is we then will talk about the nuclear capacity.
Joining us now is retired U.S. Navy Rear Admiral John Kirby. He's a former White House National Security Communications Advisor and MS Now National Security Analyst. Admiral Kirby, when you hear Donald Trump say this is Iran's last chance, why at this point would anyone in Iran, why would anyone in the world believe that this is Iran's last chance?
Yeah, it's tough to get there, Lawrence, when we have seen this movie before, calling off strikes, then starting them again, then going back to the table, then having that fail. So we just don't know where this is going to go. Neither side really has much incentive to be very honest in the public sphere. Both sides have a tendency to not exactly be fully transparent about what's going on. And the Iranians have produced the only verifiable claim, which is that they're in talks with the Omanis about one thing and one thing only. And that is the Strait of Hormuz. So I was a little encouraged to hear the president talk about sort of a stair-step approach here. We're going to get the strait open, and then maybe that'll lead to some more talks. That's basically normal diplomacy in action, but we'll have to see if it actually ends up that way, because if past is prologue, we can be glad about the pause in place, but we need to be skeptical that it's going to be in place for much longer.
Let's listen to what he said about the United States charging fees for ships to pass through the Strait of Hormuz. He said this today.
Yeah.
Would Iran be willing to return to fully free navigation of the
It has to be. I'm not going to let them charge.
Would you
If anybody's going to charge, we'll charge. We're the one that has we have total control.
Admiral, it seems when Donald Trump hears certain words, his word-producing machine just gets triggered, and so I'm not going to let them charge, he says. Then, if anyone's going to charge, we'll charge. We're the ones who have total control. I mean, of course, we're never going to charge, and everyone in the world knows the United States of America is never going to be able to, never will attempt to charge a fee to pass through the Strait of Hormuz. But what does it do to any possibility of negotiations when the other side is hearing him say utterly delusional things like this?
It's got to be hard on the Omanis right now, who are trying to establish some sort of mutual maritime route that ships can take, mutually agreed upon between Iran and Oman, who obviously border that strait very, very closely. You're not making it easy on your Omani friends to get there, to get the strait more open by saying things like that. And you're right, Lawrence, we're obviously not going to charge. It would be a violation of international law, and I'm sure the president knows that. The last time he asserted this, Secretary Rubio came right after and said that's not going to happen. But you're right, it doesn't help. But to do anything but pressurize the negotiating table right now in Oman in terms of getting the strait open. So it's not a helpful comment to make. The other thing he said that I think bears some skepticism is the idea of we control the strait. I mean, that is not true. The U.S. Navy is helping shepherd some ships through a southern route. The Iranians are trying to run through the blockade and not being all that successful about it. But only in the last 24 hours, maybe a dozen ships transited the strait. All told, that's both coming in and going out. It's hard to argue that we have a total control over the strait. It is clearly still being threatened by Iran and their military capabilities.
What is it like to be stationed on a Navy vessel in the region, knowing that you're on a war footing there, with the commander-in-chief making false threats about how to use the Navy in the Strait of Hormuz? The commander-in-chief saying erratic things, to put it mildly, about what's happening in this position that you're serving in the United States Navy. You've been away from your family now for months. The Navy is used to that. But in peacetime, the Navy does have predictable times shipped out at sea, and they know when they're going to be back, see their families again. Now you're serving in the United States Navy in the region. You have no idea how long you're going to be there. And there apparently is nothing you can listen to from the commander-in-chief that gives you any guidance about what's next.
Those sailors on those ships, they're focused on doing their job, Lawrence. I served on a ship as we transited through the Strait. We were in the tanker wars, escorting oil tankers in and out of the Strait when Ronald Reagan sent us over there in 1988. And I can tell you that my mind was focused solely on the job at hand, getting those ships safely in, getting them safely out, making sure our ship and our crew were safe and secure as well. And that's where these guys, that's where these young men and women, that's where their heads are, is really on mission accomplishment. That said, it does get exhausting when you're at a high footing and then you're called off again. Then you're on a high footing and you're called off again. And you're at sea for many, many months at a time. That takes a toll on the sailors. It takes a toll on the ships. It certainly takes a toll on the families.
Admiral John Kirby, thank you very much for joining us tonight.
My pleasure.
And coming up, Donald Trump's pick for governor of Ohio got booed off the stage by young conservative voters in Ohio last week. That's next. Last week, the Republican candidate for governor of Ohio, presidential campaign loser Vivek Ramaswamy, was booed off the stage at an event hosted by young conservatives in Ohio.
The truth of the matter is, no matter what happens in whichever direction we go, people of my generation have already made it. We're going to be fine. It's going to be your generation that pays the price.
You're a political cretin, and you need to get the out of here.
Our next guest, Dr. Amy Acton, the Democratic candidate for governor of Ohio, who is polling in a tie right now, has this message for Ohio voters.
You know what? Bottom line is, Governor, is I'm going to fight back against the cost of corruption that all of us are paying for. And Ohio, this is my promise. I'm going to make it all cost less. We're going to make it all cost less.
Joining us now is the Democratic nominee for governor in Ohio, Dr. Amy Acton. Doctor, thank you very much for joining us tonight. That message about costing less obviously means a lot when you look at the healthcare sector. And that seems to be one of the places where government policy has a lot to do with cost and the impact on health insurance payers and medical consumers of all kinds. What can you do as governor in that area?
Well, thank you, Lawrence. It's wonderful to be here, and I can tell you, Ohioans are working harder than they ever have, and it just doesn't add up. And the number one cost I'm hearing about, above the groceries and the gas and the housing and the education costs and the energy bills, is healthcare costs. I'm a doctor, I'm a mom, and I know what it means to struggle when you don't have health insurance. You know, I'm up against an opponent who has said Medicaid and Medicare are mistakes. He wants to completely dismantle them. At the same time, I'm hearing from Ohioans, a couple of Ohioans just recently talking about having babies roadside because the rural hospitals are collapsing. People are going without insurance and they can't make it to the next hospital. The cuts that are coming are going to be devastating in January of 27. So a governor can and I will fight back to keep people insured. Every one of us is one healthcare emergency away from losing everything we've worked for. I met a couple who had premature twins. They are $300,000 in medical debt. We can do something about that. For pennies on the dollar, we can renegotiate medical debt and help a couple like that. We have a prescription program to lower costs. We're fighting back on these predatory practices we're seeing. There's so much a governor can do. But, you know, my opponent just doesn't get it. He's not just out of touch. He is completely out for himself and his friends like Elon Musk and other billionaires who want to exploit my state.
Well, he's a very rich guy who absolutely does not experience any of the affordability issues that American voters are trying to deal with now. Is that something that Ohio voters understand, that Republican candidate has absolutely no connection to their experience on affordability?
You know, they are absolutely knowing what time it is, Lawrence. You know, I'm a person myself, had a very rough childhood growing up in Youngstown, Ohio. I know what it feels like to go hungry, to not have enough. My brother and I actually were in a tent in the middle of winter growing up. So these problems are real to me. I've spent my entire career trying to help Ohioans and to make sure they're well. And my opponent is saying things, not just that Medicaid and Medicare are mistakes, but he actually moved his business to Texas before running for governor. You and I have talked about the fact that he's spent 40% of his time not even in this state. You know, you saw the crowds booing. You saw them talking about being insulted by him. You know, the list goes on and on of things that he would do to the people of our state, all to give tax breaks to other billionaires and people like Elon instead of helping out the rest of us.
Amy Acton, Democratic candidate for governor of Ohio, thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Thank you, Lawrence, and I hope people will join us. Come learn more about this race at actonforgovernor.com. Thank you.
Thank you. That is tonight's last word.